All right, what is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Launchpad Podcast. I am your host, of course, Gabriel Hardy, and in this episode today, I had the honor of interviewing Vivec for the Launchpad Podcast. If you don't know who Vivec is a psychedelic content creator. He started making trip reports several years ago, and he is probably one of, if not like the most popular trip reporter guy. He essentially encapsulates people's stories of their psychedelic experiences and matches it with, visuals and commentary and things like that. And he's had his hands, I should say, he is uniquely imprinted on a lot of people in that way. And he's just a lot of fun to talk to, very insightful, very sweet guy. He's been on several of our PsychTuber podcasts. I'll link to some of those below. I'll also link down below to all of Vivec's content and social medias and stuff if you'd like to go check that out. But yeah, other than that, hope you guys are having a beautiful day. Thank you for tapping back into the Launchpad Podcast, and I really hope that you enjoy this conversation between me and Vivec. Much love.
There's no time for rotting. There was no time for brain rot over there, which was very refreshing.
Yeah. I hope you don't mind, dude. I just started the recording because this always happens where I end up wanting to talk to people before the podcast, but then we end up having an awesome conversation anyway. So
I know I always do that with my guests as well. I'm like, oh shit, we just missed out on some gold here, and we have to rewind.
Yeah, dude. So I'm just gonna informally go ahead and start it and stuff. But yeah, man. Japan sounded awesome.
I'll go back to what I said about it feeling like a psychedelic trip, because not only did it expand my mind in terms of seeing the truth of what is Japan, having an idea about it my whole life, always been a bit of a Japanophile. What was really fascinating in terms of the insight that came away from it was when I got back home, I immediately noticed I was experiencing some ego backlash, in a sense, where you get back to your safe space, your comfort zone, and you notice your bad habits start to kick in. I was like, oh shit, I'm starting to rot away in bed again. I'm not going outside for walks as much. I'm not doing all the things that I would have done over there. And I was like, right, I had to reflect and realize, okay, treat this like a psychedelic trip. Don't expect the trip to sort you. You've got to come back from the trip, integrate, and actually do the work, haven't you? There's no magic pill, is there, really?
Right. I really appreciate you saying that, dude, because one phenomenon that I've experienced and seen in other people, and I think okay, so people get really obsessed with traveling and going places, sort of like you did with going to Japan. I think that's awesome. I think people should have those experiences, do that as much as they want and feel called to it. But there's also this thing that you're describing, right? Of, I've traveled quite a bit the past year or two, and it's I find myself on pretty much every trip I go on, every place I go to, no matter how beautiful or spectacular or whatever it is, there's generally this moment where it's kind of the smoke and mirrors dissipates, right? Like the illusion of it in a way. Not that it's not still magical and beautiful, I think, but a lot of times there's just this feeling of what is it that I really wanted out of this, right? All this time, all this energy, all this money, what is it that we really want? And so that's kind of what I was curious about your Japan trip, because you're somebody who's experimented a lot with these psychedelic drugs as well and gotten the insights from experiences like that. But I was kind of curious, what you took away, what you took back from the Japan trip.
I had those exact thoughts that you just described, the smoke and mirrors. There was a moment a few days into the trip where the honeymoon period, almost like the dopamine excitement sort of dissipated, and I was like, okay, right, I'm now in another country with the same problems or spiritual baggage that I've come here with. Whereas the first few days it was, oh my god, this is bliss, this is utopia, man. Which was always, I knew that was going to happen anyway. I subconsciously knew all these things were going to come up, but there was downer points of the trip. The worst part of the trip for me, I realized, not the worst, but actually in the moment it feels uncomfortable, but actually my favorite aspect of it was sort of it forced me to reflect on my own nature. And I noticed, I went over there And obviously, I was checking out all of the most famous sites, spiritual sites, architecture, all the points of interest if we treat it like a game. And I noticed how sickened I actually am about this sort of like tourism, like social media culture of spiritually significant places, and it was something that I've been suppressing. Like, nah, it just is what it is. Let people do what they want. And people can do what they want, whatever. But I realized how emotionally receptive I am to like the shallow nature of all this shit. Like
Hmm.
we go to like this Meiji Jingu shrine, one of the most famous shrines in Shibuya, and I was loving it at first, and I loved the essence of it, what I could tap into underneath. But on the surface, all I was seeing was just like these social media influencers, and I guess in a sense, I'm sort of partly to blame. I was going about with a GoPro and that, but I tried to have a bit of a balance. So I was like, I've got to go there to get videos for my YouTube and stuff, and I was really taking it in. But then I'd really try and get involved in the culture, and I just noticed the majority of people there was just like, get this picture of me and doing the little rituals with like the put the water on the hands, rinse the mouth, and I was like, this is the sort of culture we're living in right now. But as uncomfortable as it made me, it was like this is the truth. This is what's going on in a wider scale. So yeah, I like to face the bitter truth, is what I'm sort of saying.
Right, right. No, I also appreciate that take a lot. Are you sort of when you're referring to this? I'm picking up what you're
Oh.
putting down, and I've felt into this myself. But are you also sort of referring to not only the spiritually significant sites, but there's this sort of widespread sort of push in market around like tourism in general. And it's not. I'm gonna. It's not just tourism, but like I'm trying to think of the way that like the whole like Bali metaverse like sort of lifestyle. Digital nomads.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like I was watching people. I was like, are you really walking around in real life, or are you walking around in your digital lens of life? And it really hammered home to me how we are living in this age of just sort of appearance excess, almost like look at everything's just more about appearance, isn't it? Look, I've gone to Japan, this really spiritually significant place. I'm doing all the things. I've got the video. I'm doing the rituals. I'm doing the clap, the bow, big up the kami, and all this. And it felt it was really bizarre. It was like a whoa. This is my illusions of sort of Japan's like beauty. Not it's not their fault. This is going on everywhere. It goes on in the UK. Like Stonehenge has this problem everywhere that's spiritually significant or has some like energy to it. Has this problem with just social media tourism. But then on the flip side, because there's always the flip side, my favorite moments of Japan was when I stumbled upon a temple that outshone the most famous temples on the top 10 temples to visit on Google. I was stationed near Kamata, like in Ota City, and I'd just go on my own adventure. I wouldn't go on Google or whatever saying what's the most beautiful place to check out around here. I'd just go and find it myself. And stumbled upon this temple called Homonji Temple. And it was like nobody knew it existed. It was just like the locals knew it existed, and it felt I was like, oh, I'm getting this is what I really wanted, the essence of like Shinto, the essence of Buddhism and how it's practiced over there. Actual Japanese locals and people say like almost like spiritual tourists like myself going over there and doing the actual rituals and really feeling into it. And that was the moment where I got that, when you get that feeling in your chest, it's almost like the love feeling, just like your heart chakra starts to pulsate. I was like, whoa, this is the feeling that I came for. So there's both, isn't there? There's always
Right.
both when you go on these trips. I bet it's like that going to Egypt, isn't it? Going to see the pyramids. I have these idealized ideas of going to see the pyramids and with a feeling that I want to get out of it. But
Mhm.
nothing is ever how you expect, really, is it?
Right, right. And to me, a bit of all of these things sort of feels like the carrot on the stick phenomenon, where it's just like, hey, you just gotta get, you gotta get to this thing, you gotta get to the digital nomad life, or you gotta get to Japan and have this experience at the temple and get it on social media.
Yep.
And it feels like where it's sickened me as well, dude, is seeing where like uh, in this sort of attempt to get there, there's this complete neglect of the actual spiritual sort of discipline necessary, right? Because it's
Mm.
like we can busy ourselves. There's a lot of ways in which human beings busy ourselves. And a lot of that we do is in an attempt to actually run away from these core things that we actually need to address and take care of. And I think yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
you know,
And
it's
that comes up in a psychedelic trip, and also comes up in a trip and going abroad, because they're both two seriously profound tools for expanding your mind. And
yeah,
when you expand the mind, you're gonna there's bitter truths that have to be faced. And that, yeah, there was many bitter truths that I had to sort of face in Japan. I was like, getting towards the end of the trip, I was like, okay, you're going back, you know what's going to happen, you know what you like. And this is the part of the spiritual journey, or any consciousness expanding journey, is there's going to be the sort of like homeostasis backlash, where it's like the ego, or like your past self wants to cling on to its old habits, because it's scared. Essentially, it's scared of dying, isn't it? Because change requires the death of some aspect of yourself. Um, if you've got like an eating problem and you want to stop eating ice cream all the time, you have to kill that part of yourself that is attached to it. And I really, especially going to a country that has a big Buddhist background, I really have started to tap into this idea of like, yeah, what did the Buddha say? Like, attachment is the root cause of all suffering. And a lot of people know that quote, but when you really tap into it, it's so utterly profound, because at the end of the day, where are we all going? We're going to the dissipation of form, which is the ultimate disattachment. So
yeah,
your whole life is like is letting go of these attachments.
right,
But and then there's letting go in the shallow sense of, yeah, I'm stopping doing that thing. Like, if you're addicted to something, I've experienced lots of addictions, like I let go of them in a very shallow sense. But then there's the deeper actual letting go, where it is gone. And that's two very different things. You can come, the mind loves to rationalize, I've let this thing go, I've beyond it, I've transcended it. And like, that's just the mind playing tricks on itself, isn't it?
right. Yeah, I want to drop something on you here, man, because I heard this in a podcast. I forget which podcast, like several weeks ago, but I've been dropping it on a lot of people because it just seems to come into play a lot and it loops into a lot of things well. But I heard that I heard this guy say that essentially, with everything that you love comes responsibility, right? And if you think about
Mm-hmm.
that, it's very true. You know, like I love my son. I'm responsible for being a good father, taking care of him. If I have a house plant that I love, I'm responsible for taking care of that thing, giving it sunlight. You know, with my partner, I'm responsible for, you know, loving her, showing up as a good version of myself for her. Like if you really like, you know, go run through this, like love does kind of equal responsibility in this funny way. And that thing you said about um, you know, experiencing these sort of states of expanded awareness, right? Like within that it's beautiful, but there's also a lot of darkness too. And I think that this kind of loops into that thing that the guy said about love equaling responsibility, right? Because you, in this expanded awareness moment, there was this deep sense, I'm sure, of like love and empathy for the thing that you were experiencing and witnessing and being a part of. But because of that, like you also, because of that love, you also see like the flaws in it and the things that need to be addressed and the sort of darker parts. And it's because you love it and you truly care about it, and so you see it for that full picture. If that makes sense, we can do the same thing with human beings too. If we truly love them, we see them for the bad parts and the dark parts and stuff as well too. Um, so
I
yeah,
love that.
just kind of wanted to drop that on you, dude. We're getting into some really deep shit already, man. I'm excited, and
Excellent. Yeah,
yeah,
this is what we're
yeah.
all about. Yeah,
So
great. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and the person who also had that thought as well. That's really quite fascinating, because yeah, it's true, because I've been dealing with a bit of that lately with, say, my YouTube channel, which really is like at the moment my life purpose. And I've realized how much responsibility there really is when you get to the point I guess I am now. I
mhm,
sort of was I was like, I am a very like humble, sort of modest person. About I know I have a big following, but I also had to. I feel like I was. It was. there was this like horseshoe effect going on where I was taking my modesty to almost like a toxic degree where I was like, I'm almost like trying to run away from the fact that like I am quite influential, and that imply, and with that comes extreme responsibility. So then I was like, okay, let's fucking lock in, bro. And I was like, let's actually take more responsibility and more authority over what's happening, but not in authority in like a heightened sense, not in a constricted sense. And be like, look, right, I do have this community, and it does require more of my attention. I've got a Discord, and it's really big, and I have a moderation team. And I'm always active on the Discord. I do my best, but I also have to do some self love and chill out and not get too lost in it. But I'm striking that balance now. But I noticed when I was away in Japan for like 18 days, when I was like, right, forget about the Discord. And anytime I've gone away, funnily enough, in a weird synchronic sense, I come back to the Discord and there's something that I have to attend to, because it's sort of like life is showing me that you do need to have all this self-care, but when you've poured that much love into something, there is that responsibility to come back to it and nurture it.
Yeah.
And it can't be forgotten. Like a partner, again, I reflect on all my past relationships, and I'm always analyzing them, or analyzing even friendships, and like where they went wrong, where I went wrong, and a lot of it, and where they went wrong, and a lot of it comes down to we just sort of forgot about the responsibility that we had to each other. And and you think you can run away forever, but you just can't. You can't run away from love, and that's the brutal nature of love. You can't keep running away from it. I noticed this today. I had this. I was in a bit of I was in my bit of a depressive mode today. I was like, oh, fuck's sake, I've got to get out of bed and face reality, which is stupid because I love doing that. It's hilarious. Like, there's that weird, like, inner child psychology of like, no, just stay in the bed. It's the safe place. And it's like, the other half of me, the higher self, is like pushing myself out. So I was like, right, get out of the bed, do all the things you love, working out, getting on a guitar, going on a walk, working on a video. And I was like, oh, this is what I really love. And then I went on my walk and I stumbled across, my neighbours. And the conversation I had with them, I came away from it was just really beautiful catching up, and then I just had this insight where I was like, you literally cannot escape love. Like, it's almost like when God, we're fucking getting seriously deep now. Say like the infinite singularity that is God or whatever. It is like unification. It's love. It's literally infinite unconditional love. To literally split yourself, that whole game is a game of running away from yourself, and you start and you notice, like, as a child you like this innocent beautiful thing, and you just like I noticed how fearless I was as a child. Like, you literally don't give a fuck about anything, do you? It's actually amazing. But then as the ego solidifies, as you get conditioned, and you also condition yourself, and you become yourself, you become the finite version of yourself, then that becomes the separation from love, and then the rest of your like adult life is the shadow work, isn't it, in a sense?
And getting back to the love, right? You
Going
know.
back to being a child, like discovering
Yeah.
that childlike wonder, which is what you get big time on psychedelics, don't you? The amount of laughs that you have, and you just see the ridiculousness in everything, like you see as a child. It's like almost like a giant cosmic joke. But then you quit the trickiness of psychedelics, and I've hammered this home more so than ever. And I feel like we're all on this same page right now. Is that you if you've got to go through this period of integration, otherwise you'll turn it into a dogma, and then you'll just turn it into a deeper ego game. So yeah, it's a tricky one to navigate.
Yeah, it's a really interesting pitfall that a lot of us have and do go through, right? It's the either like sort of, you know, it's kind of hard for me to. It's somewhat difficult to speak on because everyone's path is truly so unique and complex, and these compounds are so unique and complex. But yeah, I
Mm,
definitely agree with that sentiment a lot. And if you think about like where you're at, this thing that you described, I think I've heard you describe it before, but this responsibility that you feel, I find that very interesting, because I think it's valid. I think
mm,
it's valid, but I find it interesting, and especially within the context of this situation, um, because if you think about it, you're going to once again love equals responsibility. Um, but that this sort of love and responsibility that you have, and you're playing it and you're experiencing and trying to navigate through is incredibly unique, right? Like, I mean, like, where the fuck is the framework for that? Like,
mm,
how do you find the balance in that? Because you know that you have to have balance. Like, you can't take on the uh, you can't take on the energy of and the complete responsibility of people's well-being at all times, anybody who's ever interacted with you, but it's at the same time you
Mm,
do feel some sort of sense of responsibility. You know, it's I'm sure that that is incredibly complex to navigate, and you're always kind of finding like, hey, you know, how do I balance this? And
yeah,
I
that's what it is.
guess
It's the balancing act, isn't it?
yeah,
The whole point of sort of life is to be at a balance with it, is to be at an equal footing with it. You can't go too far one way or too far another way, because reality isn't too far one way or another way. It's integrative. It's whole. It's perfect, and you've got to. You can't always. You should strive for perfection, but you'll never achieve it. You've got to be on some sort of equal footing, but you will have to slip from it to then go back to it, and then it is just a ebb and flow sort of process. And at that responsibility level, I was like, for the first, when Vivec started getting really big, I think I took on a bit more than I could chew, and I'd reply to every single person who emailed me, who messaged me, who reached out to me, and I tried to be the very best person for all of them at once. And then I noticed myself quite naturally losing the spark that I had with them, and then I noticed some people be like, "Bro, are we okay?" I noticed you're not as energetic speaking to me and all the time, and I would be honest, I'd just be like, "Yo, I've just realised a bit off more I can chew. You're one of many hundreds of people that I talk to on the daily," and I was like, I had this balance at first. I was like, okay, responsibility, I've got it. I know what to do, man. And then it it became, I wasn't being responsible for my own self love, so that was actually quite interesting. I was becoming more responsible for other people than myself, and I said this in one of my latest videos. I was like, "What's my next stage of like the psychedelic journey?" And it really is. I really do need to redirect energy back inwards, because I was putting so much energy into like Vivek and the other people that I lost myself in them, and then that I noticed my bitterness coming out on them, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually horrendous. This is not what you want at all." Um, so now I'm going back inwards, where I was completely external, and yeah, that's a big part of my journey at the minute, is back to the
when
healing.
when did you kind of have that shift, man? Like in terms of when did you start to feel the responsibility of like, oh, I have to take into consideration uh, what I create, how I create, the message I put out there. But because like, what was it kind of like before that? Was it just kind of like, I'm just going to make what I want? Um,
To be fair, I've always had a good head on me for it. I know this is the thing, I talk about it, and it's a battle. Of course, it's a battle, but I know I'm very cognizant of how to navigate it. Obviously, sometimes I don't know how to navigate it, but you always persevere. You have to persevere. You can't escape from the love. But yeah, at first, no. To be fair, literally from the very day dot, like when I shared that my own trip report that initially blew up and allowed Vivec to be a vehicle for say other people's experiences, because all of the first few videos were like my four biggest trips. Like I wrote a Nero Wood style trip report, and they did really well. And my whole intention was, it was never like, oh, I've got some fucking crazy story that I want to go viral. Like there was never that intention there at all. So thankfully I've not had to circumnavigate that sort of strive for success. It's always been very wholesome. So I think that's why I've been able to work through all of these challenges quite well, even though it's difficult. But I've always managed to maintain the understanding that, right, this is fucking serious business, isn't it? Like talking about these profound. I'm so aware of what I am sharing, this information, these insights, how profound and how reality shattering they are, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that there are some people watching it who probably like. I mean, I bet you get it as well. Like you'll get these comments from like very very rigid minded. I say a lot of them are like sort of quite like Orthodox Christian people. I get them a lot. Who are like, no, they went to the salvia Rome doesn't exist. It's the ninth circle of hell. We all need to repent right now and all this. And I always accept. I always let them comment. I always let them get the word out. Because obviously part of me like, oh, should you just censor it or whatever? I was like, no, it's not right, is it? I just need to let them get the word out. It's not, they're on their own path. But yeah, I was starting to think, oh shit, there is always when the content is wide reaching in such a massive degree, you're going to get a serious breadth of consciousnesses experiencing your work, and some of them are going to like take it as like the devil's work. I had people call me the Antichrist. We've probably all been called the Antichrist at some point, because it's so profound, isn't it? Because it has so many ties to like you as yourself, you as a self, the wider world, the universe, religion. It breaks down boundaries, and it will challenge a lot of people. Our work, and that's something we've got to be prepared for. There will be some crazy people who don't like us.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's really interesting because it's this dichotomy of like it feels like I'm talking to the crazy people, and like I know I'm being perceived as the crazy person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's 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 really interesting. I have to know too. So you've made like, I don't know how many fucking trip reports at this point, and you've been
Oh, yeah.
involved in this community. You've been in direct contact with people, and sort of helping usher them along the path, their own path. You've had a lot of involvement in this, and it I really relate to you in that regard of, sort of like when I discovered these things, it became very clear to me of like, this is what I want to be involved with. Don't know how, but like, I'll figure it out. Right. Like, and I think we both kind of just have had that attitude. But like, one thing
Mm.
that I've experienced, man, is, a lot of people on high dose psychedelic experiences, especially DMT, report this phenomenon of contacting different beings and having
Mm.
feedback and communication and messages and things like that. And I've experienced this in a lot of different ways, right? Um, Within psychedelic experiences for me, but I've experienced that like over time. It's really really interesting to see the sort of feedback that I've gotten from this other thing, whether even if it is another thing, right? But the
Mm.
feedback that I've sort of gotten from this other place in regards to the sort of like integration and work that I'm doing here, right? Because that's one thing we keep talking. We talk a lot about. It's like, oh, I got the message, and like,
Mm. I
and
got the
I
phone.
know that I got to do the work, and like I'm doing the work, and this is my purpose, and I'm grounded for this, right? You're taking the airy things, we're trying to ground them into this reality.
Mm.
But like, have you gotten any feedback from the fucking DMT elves about about your YouTube channel?
What a great question, because that's so weird. This has a bit of a synchronicity, because I knew that you were going to bring that up, because this is something that people ask me a lot, because I'm very very clearly fascinated with entities and anything transcendental, metaphysical, mystical. There's so many of my reports. My favorite reports to feature, of course, are the mystical experiences where there's some connection with other, or just something I like to say beyond, because it's not in a sense, when you experience it's not actually other. It's just something that's beyond your current state of consciousness. But the irony of me being so fascinated by it is that I've actually never really encountered a DMT entity, despite all of the times I've done DMT or taken psychedelics. I've never experienced any of the things I'm fascinated in, and there's almost like this sort of, I feel like this beyond this force, this consciousness or consciousness that isn't my, not, well, because I guess it is. It's just a reflection of myself in a sense. This thing beyond me. It's sort of like playing a joke with me. So it's like, we know you want to talk to us. We know you want to, but we're not going to let you do it just yet, because you're doing it, because it would change everything. Because it's like something I've been searching for ages. And I remember I was talking with Tripwhip and Loca on we did that podcast a while ago, and it was quite surprised that I've never actually experienced like a classical entity. I've experienced one entity, and this sticks with me, always sticks with me, and I come back to it. I experienced one that quite a few people have talked about, the purple ethereal sort of like divine feminine energy, but it wasn't like I could see a it wasn't like I could see some like spiritual, weird, ethereal aura. It was like I just had that feeling of, because I mean, I'm reflecting on it now. I can't even. It's just me reflecting on the images that. But I took. Well, I had a 4-ACO DMT overdose, and I just became like a fucking guy. I just became the Galaxy Brain meme, and
Dude, a 4 ACO DMT like mega dose is like a 6 hour DMT trip. It's really
yeah,
crazy.
I did not know what I was in for, because I spoke about it, because I got these trippy chocolates off just someone I managed to find
Were they
on.
Tootsies?
I don't know. They were just these like little like these little hexagons. They're really
Okay.
weird. Yeah, these. I think someone just made them in the kitchen, to be honest, and
Yeah.
slammed loads of 4-ACO DMT in there. And I assumed they'd be 10 milligrams each. I was like, surely there's not much in here. And there was 30 milligrams in each, so I took all three of them. So I took 90 milligrams, which is like, it's mega dose. And I remember
Dude,
messaging the guy, like, I was like, mate, I've just took all three of these. Like, do you know how much is in them? I'm just
that's
assuming
like
it's
10
10.
plus grams of mushrooms. Like the equivalent of that, like
No
roughly, is like
shit.
10 plus grams of mushrooms, dude.
See, I didn't know that, and now it all makes sense why I'm so attached to these megadose reports. Because in a sense, I'm trying to discover like what I experienced, and it was so funny, when because you messaged back like, bro, you've literally taken like 90 milligrams, possibly plus of 4-HCDMT. I was like, oh, cheers for letting us know. I'm sure I'll be all right. And there was that moment where I was like, when you take a psychedelic and then the ego's like does not want its death to come, and it's like, nah, it's not going to hit me. It's not going to hit me. I start watching this film, and then I'm like, yeah, it's not going anywhere. This really is it. And then the film starts coming out the TV. Literally, I was watching this animation, and the arm came out the TV and like grabbed me and sucked me into the TV. And then I literally just woke up. I was like, nah, fuck that. Like, I went to ego mode again. I was like, no, I must stay here. I must anchor myself to reality. Went back to bed, and every single thing I did to try and distract myself from the inevitable dissolution of self just made it worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was just like, as it happens in all these experiences, I was just like, fuck it, just take me. And then I became the galaxy brain. And I was just not me. All I remember is just being like this maelstrom of like energy, and there was this just this the purple there was the color purple was so. I found the color purple quite trippy anyway, to be fair.
I love
Uh,
purple, dude. It's my favorite color by far. I obsessively tell people that.
Mate, same here. And something about it, I've always associated it with DMT and like high
Me
dose,
too.
and I've always associated like green with LSD and different colors with different substances. And but purple, there's this maelstrom of purple energy and unity, and then there was this purple ethereal woman that I interpreted as like um, the feminine side of me made manifest, and it was like me talking to myself, but they had a voice. It was the most lovingly sexy, like intimate but motherly sort of female voice, and it was like, everything's going to be all right, like literally everything is going to be okay, and every single thing you've ever worried about is just a construction. And I came back from that trip with, and I've just never come down from it, in a sense. Obviously, I've gone back into the ego has reformed, the human, the mind of the Vivec ego has reformed, but that feeling, I can never ever get over it. Like, every time I go to bed, like I'm just about to get to sleep, and I just remember being that galaxy brain, and I'm like, fuck, you
Would
cannot
you
forget that.
would you describe that moment with that woman as feeling sort of like a download?
Yes, it did feel like a down. It felt like a download of universal love, um, into this very, because I have always struggled with like my ego, in a sense, not in an inflated sort of narcissistic sense, but just sort of like almost in the opposite sense, almost in like because there's the narcissistic dense ego, and then there's like the victim mentality, like density of ego. I think there's different gradations of it. It's a whole spectrum, and
Mhm.
for a lot of my life, I had like I was just. I've been berating myself my whole life, basically. There's always been a war. There's still a war. I'm quite a neurotic person, and in that moment, it was like all the neuroses failed, and I downloaded the thing that I've been trying to connect to the server to download my whole life, and it literally came at that moment. And when I came out of it, and I went back to the Vivek, like separated self, I just could not. I just literally went on my phone. I just like told everyone, I was like, "Fucking hell!" Like, it's all gonna be all right. You come back from these trips and you go a bit crazy, don't you? With these people, of like,
Right.
I got the info. It's gonna be fine. Don't worry,
Dude,
everybody. And they're always like, "What? We love you, man." But like, what are you on about?
yeah, another DMT trip, Gabe. Okay, here we go, dude. Like
Yeah,
this download phenomenon. I just like I have never been able to adequately put it into words, and so it's like the only way I can really connect with people on it is other people who have experienced it, right? And that's why I love sort of like you reading a lot of these trip reports. I love hearing people like you tell stories like this because it also takes me back to that sort of place, and I can truly empathize and feel in what they're trying to describe, but it's so
yeah,
damn hard, man. And like Terrence McKenna, the way he used to describe like the DMT download, no, he described it a lot of ways, of course, but he would
yeah,
tell people, he would say, he was like, this does set you apart from your peers. He was like, because you know from it and they don't. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
there's I'm not trying to. My message with that isn't that, like, in some sort of way, people who've like smoked DMT or received these downloads are better or anything like, or more intelligent or more like
no.
spiritually aware. It could be the opposite effect from that, of course. But
Mm,
there is
that's the
something.
trickery.
There
That's the
is
trickery, isn't
something
it? We
that,
notice it.
yeah, man, there is something that just seems to happen, right? Like kind of like you described, it sticks with you, even though it's like the Men in Black. Like, you get your flash and it gets somewhat memory wiped, so you're like bumbling with confusion and like trying to tell people. But there is something in it, man, that forever kind of sticks with
Yeah.
you.
No matter how,
And
I realized this other day, I've talked to a lot of people about this that I've had on like the trip sitters, and I've just interacted with through Vivec, and no matter how far you stray off the path after having that download, that literal direct experience, no matter how far you stray off the path, lol, again, there's no escaping the love. You literally, or it's because a lot of people, I've noticed a lot of people do it in the psychedelic spiritual scene, that we do go through the dark night of the soul, sort of like the downfall arc, and like this is sometimes inevitable. Some of us might not go through it, some of us might go through it in a more subtle way, but like almost keep it to ourselves. But you got like people sort of, there's Connor Murphy. I bring him up a lot. He was like brilliant mind, and I feel like he's come around from it now. I don't know much about the Connor Murphy lore, but he was more into like personal development on a very like foundational level. He got into psychedelics, he got into like awakening, etc., and he just started abusing ayahuasca and psychedelics and developed the classic narcissistic god complex, not the oh, I am God and everything is beautiful and harmonious and interconnected and we're all one. It was the no, literally, I am the only single God and every single person is a projection of my mind, and nothing matters and I can do whatever I want. So that's you've got to be cognizant of that. That it can inevitably happen if you abuse psychedelics.
yeah.
Uh, you don't want to remove yourself too much from this human game. Don't get too lost in the human game, but also
Hmm.
don't remove yourself from the human game and fucking glitch the game out and break it, or else you're just going to live a very sad, neurotic life. And that
Hmm.
was the worst thing for me about psychedelics, was just losing myself in it, and I really
Yeah.
did. Because I just became attached to these realms, and I started to I started to get bored of the mundanity of this. But this is literally the least mundane thing ever. Like, look at
Hmm.
all this fucking manifesting it. Is it mind?
Yeah.
Is it matter? I don't fucking know. Like, that's the beauty of it. I don't know anything. But then I was like, oh, I felt like I knew the other realms more. And I was like, oh, I felt more comfortable there. And they became like my safe space. And it was like I was scared of this because I don't know less about this than I do about them.
Right. Right.
Weird.
Like, okay. Uh, can I sort of like brainstorm with you, man? Because I was thinking about this on a walk yesterday, and it was
Oh, my
based off.
pleasure.
I think it was based off like a tweet or something I saw, but it was somebody else involved in the psychedelic space, and they made this. You may have seen this. They made this long post about like, all right, cutting to the chase. Here it is. Like, and it was a good post, but like essentially the
Mm,
message was like, is something that I've heard Beckon before. We've probably all said this at some point, but the core of the message kind of seemed like uh, a lot of the influencer stuff, fake, psychedelics, trap, possibly. It's really about integrating being here now in the moment, right? And I was like, kind of like it was dressed up in a much more eloquent way, of course, but that was sort of the
mm,
core of the message. And I was like, just thinking about this as I was walking and stuff, and I don't know, man. I hear this message beckoned a lot, right? And it seems like majority of the leaders in the space and influencers is kind of like, this is the core of it, and this is the message. This is what you need to know, right?
mm,
Like this is what you need to know. And yeah, I don't know. Like I guess it had me sort of postulating, right? It was like kind of that basic core thing again, like, well,
mm.
what is the purpose? And because it felt like what this person was insinuating was, hey, the core purpose, the final sort of goal destination, is to, in a sober state, reach this place of extreme sort of peace and equanimity, which I think is great. Like, I think we should encourage people to do that as well too. But I
Yeah.
was also kind of like, I don't know. I was sitting there thinking, like, is that really it? Like, is that the fucking goal? Is that the goal that we should pull from all of this and project onto other people, right? And I don't know, I just
That's
kind of want
very interesting.
I wanted to
Yeah.
get your perspective on that. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm still thinking it through myself. Do you know what I'm saying?
No.
But I just kind of want to hear your perspective because you're a very intelligent, articulate guy.
Oh, thank you. I think you are as well. That's why we get along. But I feel that, yeah, I get where this person's coming from, and I also respect the nobility of the statement because it was all coming from good intentions, as all of this stuff does. But something about that strikes me as a claim to absolutism, and as we know from Star Wars, only a Sith deals in absolutes. And I feel like when it's like, no, this is the goal, it's like, well, do you realize the trickery of relativity and subjectivity is like, I think for a I think this. If I would phrase it, but I don't like I really don't like to be. Oh, I am the this guy who's got all these good ideas. I like to be that. I don't fucking know. I'm literally just some guy on the internet sort of mentality. Which I say all the time in my own camera videos. I'm like, I don't fucking know. I never make claims to absolutism or try not to, even though I seem like I know a lot. Um, if I was to phrase that, I would say that there's a big portion of the psychonaut spiritual people who need to, whose not end goal, but goal right now needs to be to let go and get back to this. Whereas there's other people who are like never heard of it, people who aren't into spirituality, because there's people who aren't into it and who are deep into it. So on the other hand, there's people who don't know anything about psychedelics and are too lost in the human game. Their goal right now is to break out of the game and realize that there's something beyond it. And this is very interesting actually. You brought this up because I've noticed it in a lot of like boomers and I'm mates with people of all ages and I'd say like my parents' friends who are like 60 coming on 70 and that, and like they've had this sense of self their whole life and they're sort of like on repeat, and I can sense in them like what you sort of really need. Obviously it's all individual and relative, but a lot of them are the sense like you need something beyond what you've got right now. Like you need to go beyond. You've cracked the human game on a survival level, foundation level. You need to. You probably the best thing for you is there's a desire within yourself because you literally cannot run away from spirit, as we know. There's a desire within them to go beyond, but they don't know anything about psychedelics and spirituality, and that's the importance of sharing the message of it all. But on the other hand, there's people who are already into it who need to just sort of fucking just take a chill and just step back from it for a bit and get back to like, I don't know, just normal shit like hobbies and careers and relationships because they you can lose them if you lose the human illusion.
Right.
So
And
I
you can
would.
see it in some people's energy where it's like, this isn't big picture for you. This very much is about this lifetime for you, right? Like it's
Mm,
very, all of the actions, all the intention, energy, it feels like it's for this, it's protecting this certain vehicle. It's not for the expansiveness of your soul and of God in the big picture of it. I remember I had this, speaking of megadose 4-ACO DMT trips, I took 110 milligrams one time, dude.
he's
And
gone beyond.
the entire experience, like I had brushed up against like reincarnation within other experiences and it like been in part of the mix, like part of the thing, but for like 2 or 3 hours laying on my bed like in the middle of this trip, man, like the entire thing was super visionary and it was all about like reincarnation. There was this switch, this shift that happened to me after that trip of like truly like everything, all of my actions, even to this day, man, like truly feels like this, like resonant, like not like this lifetime, like getting game to like the next thing. It feels like this, like soul, like kind of infinite journey thing. Like it's living like as if I'm gonna live forever, right?
Yeah,
Not in the ears,
it's like the oversoul, isn't it? There's like
right?
there's
And there, you know, living as if I'm gonna live forever, not like in an irresponsible way, but and I remember like within that experience, man, like this visionary, deep, really, really vivid visionary experience on 110 milligrams before ACO, going through the reincarnation. It felt like I was being inducted into this like archaic like cult thing that just like has been around that other people like you know what I'm saying have been a part of too. Like it was really weird, but and I
mm,
was there's a lot of within that experience. Looking at my own sort of life and myself introspectively from that unique sort of perspective that you get, right? And
Mm.
what I saw was the entirety of it, right? Like there was very much that question of like, well, what is the point of being here now? Like here now, like what am I doing? Like that was there's a lot of that, and like I was seeing the entirety of it. I didn't see myself like sitting next to a Bodhi tree by a river, breathing correctly, and fucking got the high score. Like it wasn't like that, and true, like and surely it was some of like the darkest depths and like worst versions of myself that I saw were most valuable. You know, not that I'm saying I
Mm.
want to become a worse version of myself
Hmm.
from this point forward or by any means, right?
But you got to
But
embrace it in a sense, haven't you? You can't shy away from looking at it.
right, and what I'm describing is such a surface level of my own one unique sort of intricacies with this journey thing, and expand that out across everybody. And it just brings me back to this sort of like thing that I was postulating about, like, well, who the fuck are you to tell people this is where you got to get to? Like, yeah, that's part of the path. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yeah, yeah. Like I say, you don't. This. Yeah, it's interesting that they said it because I understand where they're coming from. I understand the sentiment, and there's a beauty to what they're saying. But I think that's a bit crass saying like, oh, what are all these influence? Like, oh no, this is the brass tacks, because then they obviously have this idea about psychedelic influences and the new psychedelic like online revolution, but they're playing that exact same game by making that tweet and getting all these retweets and likes and comments and that, and you know for a fact they're feeding into it because I mean we all it's hard not to. It's hard not to. It's a very hard space to navigate. It's a very different time. Dakota hit the nail on the head. He was on his live stream. We were talking because obviously we've got to know him, and a lot of people now who I've always looked up to. Is very surreal for me. Like talking to Dakota and your mate Tom, like people who literally got me into this stuff. Because I got into psychedelics based on my own actions, but then I was like, oh shit, there's other people who are talking about it, and then now skip 10 years down the line or whatever, and now I'm talking to him. It's fucking weird. But he said on this live stream, we're talking, it was the first time we really communicated, and he made this great statement where he's like, the torch is now being passed from the psychedelic pioneers of the past decades to quite scarily us in a sense, and it's being passed, and that is a very very tricky thing to navigate 100%. And there's even more challenges now that there's this whole I don't know, this like culture of like social media ego. The ego in the world is just denser than it has been in a long time. We can all sense it. We can all sense this madness in the world, and it's almost harder now that more people are getting psychedelics, and like that also means there's more people going to co-opt them for their own selfish agenda. Like everyone knows about fucking DMT nowadays, don't they? Like my parents know about it. Random people, like people ask me what I do, like randomly. If because I never really tell people what I do. I always like if people just ask me, like, just, oh, I'm a YouTuber. I always feel a bit embarrassed about it because it's such a strange thing to say. But obviously, they always find it interesting because I guess it is interesting. And then I'm like, oh, how do I explain it? And I always say, oh, I just sort of cover like fringe stuff. And then like, oh, like what? And I'm like, oh, psychedelics, UFOs, mysticism. And then I'm always shocked and pleasantly surprised that people actually know about this stuff, but they know about it on like a level, but they don't know how deep it really goes. And it's up to us to sort of educate the populace and not lose ourselves in it and remain objective, but also I know I'm rambling, but it's fucking hard to
yeah,
it's hard to cognize all this shit. But
dude,
you've
it's a
also
lot.
got it is,
I've
but
thrown a lot at you, bro.
you've also got to. I thought about this when I was walking back to get on this podcast. I was like, what I love about our community is, fuck me, we're all from seriously different walks of life, aren't we? Like, I know a lot of you are from the US, but like, it doesn't even matter what country you're from. There's like, I've got these psychedelic YouTubers in the UK. We're all different. All of us, I'm like, I love this. Is what I love about you. Like, you've all got this very unique mind to you, and that's what you need. You can't have these carbon copy sort of like. I mean, I feel like you can't even be neurotypical to get involved in this stuff at all. But there'll be some like grifters. In the future. There's going to be some people who like the devil is going to try and co-opt this profundity, as it always does, as it has done with religion, as it has done with anything, with art, with films, with anything. Eventually, the dense ego loves sees like, let's get our fucking filthy mitts on that and turn it into something fucked up, and that's something we've got to be aware of, and it's already like not already happening, but there's controversies and dramas in all sorts of niches as there has been in ours, but it's up to us to be in this super like what we have. I feel like we have a responsibility to be more conscious than these other niches. These other niches are in competition with each other. We literally cannot do that. And as Dakota said, we all need to be in harmony. But it will be harder for us to be in harmony because we're dealing with more profound shit.
Right.
Fucking hell,
And
what a
it,
mouthful
dude,
that was.
yeah, and that last part there, man, it's kind of like, okay, kind of like we were saying earlier, how do we find balance in that, right? Like it's we're describing this desire to ground ourselves and to integrate these things, right, and put them into practice. Chop wood, carry water here. Um, but this existing in this reality, the way that it's currently is itself, is a bit maddening, right? Like there's this the participation in it alone, right? And so there's sometimes feels like this degree of isolation that is necessary to keep sanity, but
Mm,
there's this thing that I struggle to find balance with because it's like I see the value in isolating myself and you know finding sanity in that way and going alone and having that internal own strength and but it's also like okay, but if I want to like ground these things into reality and kind of
mm,
you like help other people along their path and things like that, you're somewhat required to participate in it. And so
mm.
it's like finding that balance of like, all right, I'm going to sit at the Bodhi tree for 30 minutes and then I'm going to come back and answer emails and like
It's
fucking
like a microcosm of the hero's journey, isn't it? That's funny, but it's true,
yeah.
isn't it? That's what the hero's journey sort of says. And obviously, I don't like making claims to absolutism, but there's a lot of truth in that statement, and it is a common thread between all people's lives of this, especially if you get into the role of like a teacher or an like as we call them today, like influencers. Which I think the word influencer has too many bad negative connotations, but that's just social dynamics. Whatever, you can be a positive influencer or a negative influencer. So you are at some point going to have to go on your little. I feel like to really navigate this space properly, you've got to go on your little. You got to go on your little journey, haven't you, to sort of reflect inwards and to find your inner strengths, and then come back to the village and enlighten the people, but not. But don't treat yourself like a martyr or anything. Navigate it with consciousness. Don't fall into the ego, although it's fucking hard. Like that's the human game. We have to. Right now we are separate, aren't we? There's always going to be that challenge to overcome the separation, but that's part of the fun, I guess. Oh shit! Your microphone's just muted.
There we go. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
thought the
But
Matrix just glitched out
well,
then.
Huddy's on fall break, and so he's just back here like playing with toys and shit. And I heard him like make a loud noise, so I was like, "Oh, mute." But
I thought I could hear the SpongeBob theme. To be fair, was he watching SpongeBob?
dude, yeah, dude, he fucking loves SpongeBob, and it's
Based.
really great because I love SpongeBob, and they actually like still make some or have made new episodes, and they're really good and shit.
Oh,
So
it's still going on. That's mad. Because I'm fucking super SpongeBob fan of like the there's always the golden era, isn't there? And then there's like
yeah,
the downfall the downfall arc of any animated show like Simpsons. But then oftentimes after a while they start to pick up the artistry, and that's
yeah,
awesome. That I feel this is interesting about the next generation. Just to like segue into something else is lots of people are worried about the Gen Alpha, aren't they? Like they're worried about this brain rot and we're worried about all this shit. And I was like, I just feel like there's this age old adage of like the fucking next generation is screwed and all this, and it's like they've been saying this forever. Like
hmm
because it's the same challenge in it with a different flavor. And but a
yeah,
big thing, I think a big thing that I respect about parents now there's a lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more challenges to navigate, but the thing I respect about like parents that I know is that you do have a duty to sort of enlighten your child, don't you? As well, not thought that this is a very big difference between being a Bible bashing Christian, slap him on head with fucking like Saint John's Gospel or whatever. Whereas on the other hand, it's like you just got to like love and nurture your child and nurture that consciousness. And there's practical ways you can do it, but the real way is just the connection in it. What is love really? It is connectivity. And
Yep.
to get over this, oh, the fucking craziness of Gen Alpha and like all the problems they'll face with it, it's just parenting is a big thing. And I notice a lot of like, I feel sorry for them because it's such a the challenge of being a parent is crazy, but I
It is, dude.
also, yeah, fucking hell, I bet. I can't even look after myself, like let alone this creature. And then I noticed in sort of like my mum works in a primary school, and she gives me a lot of insights into sort of like I hate to say it, like just the lesser conscious, and I feel sorry for them because they've got their own problems, but the lesser conscious parents who basically just have the kid, they love the kid, they do the bits, and then they just let the kid like sort of do its own thing when it's at like age 5, and then that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, isn't it? That's throwing him into the deep end. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that you can't just, and even with partners like a relationship, you can't just do all the work for a bit. You've got to keep fucking working at it. Like your life purpose, your career, you've got to keep working at it. You can't just stop. You've got to keep
Yeah.
connecting because if you don't connect, then the love goes, and then that's how you create the devil.
And dude, you'll see it in kids too. Like kids, if you're out somewhere and like a child's misbehaving for their parents, it's usually you'll see it. Like the parents, like you can just kind of tell like that kid's not getting enough love and affection. Like not getting
Mm.
enough like eye contact, connection, vocal communication, touch, things like that. It's I
Oh,
was
that
just talking.
saddens me so much. Like,
Yeah,
when
man.
I'm out and about, especially in the UK, we're all fucking dickheads. I swear. Like, very stoic, sort of like detached people. That's just out in our nature. But there's something about like proper something really gets to me. I don't get irked by a lot of stuff, but when I see like the mother, especially the mother, really who should be like the seriously intimate sort of like the mother who, yeah, exhibiting the motherly divine feminine energy, and they're like slapping the kid on the side, don't fucking do that again. Why are you embarrassing me and all this? And I'm like, holy shit, like I know I can't look after a child at this point in my life, but Christ almighty, I do a better job than they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is how you create generational suffering and trauma. It's like,
Hmm.
fucking hell, man.
Yeah, dude. I was just talking to my girlfriend about this morning about sort of like the whole screen time thing, the notion that you're putting forth about this generation, and it definitely is a very unique challenge that like parents right now are facing with this generation because there's not a blueprint for how it's like how do you go about it and what do these things lead to and like how life is how we interact with the world is so radically different than how I interacted with the world when I was a kid. I try and like kind of like with everything else. I really
Mm.
try and have like balance with him. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we can like we'll play Fortnite, but also like we're gonna go to the park for a few hours today and like get really
Yeah.
sweaty and like do pull ups. You know what I mean? Just and like,
Yeah,
hey, you do pull ups, dude, because like muscles are healthy and like muscles look good and you'll feel better and you know what I mean? Just like really like
exactly.
you over explain everything. I really hated as a kid having the parents to be like, yeah, the because I said so parents because I as a young kid you're
Oh,
like
yeah.
I'm intelligent enough to understand if you really explain it to me. So yeah, man, it's just it's really and I think about it all the time with him because it's like um, with okay I'm currently evolving with and adjusting with AI for like my career, right? Same thing with this dude. Like he's going to be growing up with AI. Like there's no telling what homework or even schoolwork is going to look like when he's in high school, like in high
Yeah,
school,
that's mad.
and what's actually going to be valuable and transferable to something afterwards, right? Like
Mm.
that's a really important thing. But and then it's all, and then it's the bigger, the more important thing of all that is like, how do I keep him happy and healthy and still able to navigate all of this madness? And I'm just starting to learn and navigate through myself. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
times are getting really freaking crazy, dude. So,
Yeah, I love
um,
it. I love it in a sense because it's crazy, but you gotta love the craziness in a sense. Like we're fucking crazy creatures, humans. We're absolutely fucking mental. Like what I was thinking about before, just before you were gonna say something. I just wanted to say this. I had this insight today that right, we've got all this crazy technology. We've got AI. We're like leaning on like quantum computing and stuff that is just I thought was like year 3,000, like, yeah, 30,000 and beyond. And then we're doing it now, and it's exponential. And I think this is one real, this is the craziest thing about humans for me, is that I don't think humans on a level, on an earthly global level, are conscious enough to be navigating these technologies and handling them. And that always gets me thinking about aliens. Why do we see these reports of these aliens fucking turning off the nukes and shit? It's almost like these aliens, these who are very much. I hate, again, don't like to make claims to absolutism, but if you just fucking actually start looking into it, right, they're fucking here. They're there. They're everywhere. They've been
Yeah,
here forever. You can't deny reality. If I go in a microscope and I look at a fucking cell, I can't deny that there's a cell in front of me. If I really research something that has a lot of credence and empiricism surrounding it, I cannot deny its reality anymore. And the same with the UFOs, whether you like it or not, fucking just get over it and get into it, as far as I'm concerned. But
yeah,
when you look at them turning off these nukes and shit, it's like they're like, oh shit, the humans are creating this technology at a point where, like, maybe they shouldn't be making it at this level of consciousness that they're at. And it's almost like, oh shit, look, yeah, fucking turn the nuke off. Like, look
yeah.
at what happened with fucking, like, the Trinity test and shit. All of the people said they did the Trinity test, and what started happening? All these fucking lights came out the sky, and it was like, it's literally, get in the fuck, put yourself in the shoes of the alien. They're like, oh shit, they're doing that thing that we really feared they wouldn't do at this point. And
Yeah.
that's when they come. That's when the observers. I'm
Dude,
sorry, I just can't stop talking about
no,
aliens.
dude, let's go down the alien rabbit hole. Dude, the thing that really interests me about the aliens, and has since I was a kid, is like, I guess what I'm saying is, as a child, I even intuitively felt into this, just like, it was like, okay, rationally, yeah, they probably are. Like, and they
Mm,
probably are here. Like, it wouldn't surprise me. It was, even as a young kid, I very much had that mindset.
same.
Today, I feel the exact same way. Like, yeah, they probably are. What really interests me about this conversation, though, is like the sort of like, why, right? Like, if that is the case, like, what are they doing with us, and like, what is their goal with us, and how does this play into the big picture of things, right? Like, I can smoke DMT and go talk to an alien, but also maybe they're
mm.
visiting us from outer space. Maybe the Earth is flat. You know what I'm saying? But like, it's
Yeah, how do we know that? That's we scoff at flat earthers. I mean, obviously, like, I'm just gonna say, like, and then 99% of me knows. No, literally, that's what I can say. 99.9% of me knows that the Earth is not flat. But that 0.1% is me actually legitimately admitting that I've not fucking gone up into space. I've not actually gone up into space and see what's beyond that. I've actually just believed, like, secondhand experiences. And
right.
this is where my, like, friction with sort of like science and objectivism and empiricism sort of comes.
So
Where
much of
people,
science is faith too, man. Like that, and that's my issue with it, is when people use it as sort of like, all right, well, here's the proof, you know, and it's like, okay,
mm,
but like, at what level do you understand this? Because there's a level of like depth of understanding that you need to have to actually
yeah,
be able to, it's for yourself in your own record, believe in this thing, right? You know what I'm saying? But like, there's so much of science in certain like terms and words that truly people kind of just take blind faith in, and like have to, like, but yeah,
mm,
oh yeah, because things are made of this and that, and this explains, it's a fucking, like, there's so many math equations about the universe and shit that like, it was like new math was created to prove this thing the way the universe is, and then like later down the road, it's like, actually no, new math
yeah.
equation, here's how things actually are. And so yeah, that's kind of my problem with the science stuff as well too. I do
I
think we should
think I
make
think
an
that's
attempt to understand, but I'm sorry, continue.
I think that's why people. I think that's why scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like, it's atoms, it's all atoms and all this shit. It's like he's scared of aliens and psychedelics because he knows deep down, he has this shadow energy of, he knows his paradigm is gonna dissolve if he
Hmm.
took a psychedelic or got abducted by an alien. And to be open to that means you have to basically rewrite everything. And scientists are getting, they've got a bit of this egoic backlog of like, oh, we're sick and tired of fucking rewriting everything. We finally figured it out or whatever. Like, there's always the progressive and like the sort of like conservative, not even political, just like on a literal definition of what those words mean. Like, you've got the traditional scientist and the scientist that wants to go beyond. And that they're the scientists that I respect, the ones that are like really into aliens, like Richard Dolan and just all of them, Jacques Vallée, everyone, all the psychedelic scientists, but that aren't rigid in the beliefs. They're like, oh shit, there's something here that has empirical data behind that I can't ignore anymore, and I need to be honest with myself that I've been rejecting it. And going back to just the aliens, like, what is the purpose of them? None of us. The beauty almost of get. I've read so many books on aliens, and had my own contemplations. And obviously, the big Donny of ufology is Jacques Vallée, and the man who knows more about this than possibly anyone on Earth knows less about it than anyone, because the more he tries to understand, the wider the problem becomes. And every single book of his, he always ends it with like, maybe we will never understand because they are so beyond us. But what is true in a sense is they've fucking got plans. They've got ideas about humanity as a whole, and are they preparing us like that? Lou Elizondo and that talk about us being like sort of like spiritual vessel, or like as if the others, which is what they sort of call them, whatever you want to call them, greys, aliens, NHI, they sort of, maybe they see us as like these vessels to nurture, but they do it in such a fucking precise, subtle way. Because everyone, the sort of like shallow-minded person, like, well, why didn't they stop World War II, and why are they not coming down here and turning us all into aliens using some magic ray gun? It's like, because that isn't love. That's forcing. But God doesn't force the devil to make it realize it's the devil. The devil has to realize it himself and transcend that using its own free will and consciousness. And it's sort of like the aliens are like sort of curating us in a very, very subtle way. And maybe they want us to join some galactic civilization, to join all the other super enlightened beings. I like that idea because it's fun.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's humbling too, right? It reminds me of a moment I had a few weeks ago where it was me and some friends, and we were having a conversation, and there was a bit, fueled by some party favors, and there was a comment made. There was this girl, and she's a sweet girl, love her to death, but she was just going on one of her psychedelic Jesus rants, right?
Oh, I
And
love him.
one of the things that she said was she expressed essentially for like this sort of anger and hatred towards Christianity and organized religion, and then said something like, well, and then that's why we're here, and we're ushering in the new thing, new consciousness planet. And that's like I there's a lot that I kind of agree with that sentiment, right? And I probably beckoned it myself before too. I think almost all of us probably have within this space of like, fuck organized religion, psychedelics, right? Like it would,
Yeah.
but
It's nothing
um,
new, is it, at this point? Nothing
yeah,
new.
yeah, but then whenever she said that, my friend spoke up, and I loved what he said because it was very much needed in that conversation. What he said was, I love Christianity, and Jesus. And she was like, how? He was like, well, he's like, if you think about it, he was like, it quite literally took that and all the misconceptions and all the darkness that came with it to get us to this point that we're at right now.
Oh, I
You know what
love
I
that.
mean? And I was like, oh, dude, I was like, that was so gangster. Like, we all need to hear that.
That was a mic drop moment. That
We all know that, right? But it's like somebody needed to say it, right, to bring it to
that
the
is
surface. Yeah.
that's super nuanced. Like, I understand her as well. Again,
Mm-hmm.
she's just at a different level of like of understanding of the psychological dynamics of humans and stuff. And I went through it. I went through an atheist period. I had a Facebook group called the Anti-Religious Hit Squad when I was like 12, and it's
Yeah.
just so ridiculous looking back, because you think like, oh, I've transcended. You always think you've transcended. You always think you've moved beyond, and you do move beyond. Literally, you move beyond to get more conscious. But then there's that ego of like, oh, it was all bull. I think a lot of it comes from like the fact that maybe she was indoctrinated into it. Maybe she had like a feeling of it. I went to a religious primary school. I went to Church of England primary school, so I automatically engineered a judgment of it. But now, as I get up, I'm like, fucking hell, Jesus Christ was the G. Like your mate said, like he is the most. Whether you argue whatever about the historicity of Jesus or whatever, that guy is the most influential person in the world, other than
Yeah.
like Hitler and Mickey Mouse and all these other people that everybody knows
Yeah.
about. He
He
is
really
the
swung his dick a little bit, bro.
he
Like
fucking
he's
did,
lasted
mate.
3,000, however many fucking years,
It's
bro.
it's still it's still swinging beyond this
Yeah.
fucking physical realm. You got the Buddha, you got all the famous prophets, and the one people that everybody knows about. these are super influential humans, and like I really do try to put like I'm not a Christian at all, but like I see that there's truth within all these religions for
Hmm.
me, and I feel like there's truth in a in sort of like the universal sense that I tap into. Again, what do I know? But I've read them all. I've read loads of them. I've really tapped into it. I can filter out the egoic bullshit in the Bible from the okay, this was like really sort of this was closer to the mouth of Jesus than to the mouth of the disciple, because that's
Right.
one thing you have to understand about the Bible is my guy JC didn't sit down with a pen and paper and scribe it all, did he? It's a lot of it's secondhand, and when it's secondhand, when you have someone who's not enlightened and they're filtering the enlightened person's words, their egoic biases are going to come through into that. The Bible would have been fucking well different if Jesus sat down and wrote it all on fucking Microsoft Word or whatever, if we get a new Jesus or
And
something.
it's interesting when you consider this concept of, well, maybe Jesus or God or whatever the universe, like knowingly was like, yeah, they're gonna fuck this up really bad. This is part of the
Yeah.
story of them fucking this
Yes.
up really bad. You know what I'm saying?
That's part of the karmic journey of
Yeah.
humankind. The most powerful quote. There's so many powerful quotes from Jesus. Yeah, like the kingdom of heaven is within. That's talking about the fact that, like, say, you are the light. You are consciousness. There is no separation between me and you, and that's the problem. The deification of Jesus, saying like, oh, it's all about Jesus. Like, oh, you're fucking missing the whole point of what he was saying. It's funny because if Jesus came back today, all the Orthodox Christians would fucking burn him at the stake and crucify him again.
Yeah.
But my favorite quote of his was, "Yeah, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," because they don't know that
Mhm.
they're God. They haven't come to the realization that Jesus really did. He didn't die for our sins, because realistically, sin doesn't exist, because we're all just. It's almost God cosplaying as the devil. I've used this a few times. I can't remember who I heard it. It was a great statement. I was like, that's basically what it is, because cosplay is pretending to be something that you're not, and that's the whole game of the humans, what we're doing. Like, and Jesus was so conscious and so loving that he literally allowed himself to be tortured to the point of returning back to infinite consciousness.
That
He
was his
loved
responsibility. It was
that.
his love.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that the depth of the crucifixion, for most people it's just a fucking, it's just iconography. It's like fucking, I don't know, a famous movie poster or whatever. But think about the actual act, like the act of Jesus doing that. He showed everyone that you can love unconditionally to the point where you literally allow yourself to be tortured for the sake of the rest of human history. That's fucking mega. Most people are not that God realized or awakened, but that's part of the plan. That's part of the journey.
Hmm. I think the story of Jesus is like one of the most. It might be like the hero's journey, right? You know what I mean? Like it is like because of the profundity of the overall end message of like I'll fucking go to the extremes for everybody else's sake because we're all God. You know what I'm saying? Like cut through the
Yeah.
bullshit, and it's really unfortunate because, like you said, there's so much gold within it that gets misconstrued for sort of power dynamics and personal gain and just it's really
Same
interesting.
with all the religions, really. Some people obviously a bit more. There's more vitriol spewed towards more of the Judeo-Christian ones. Obviously, the big one for the past few many decades has been the the judgment of Islam. Whereas, like, I mean, look at the Sufis and like actually look at what was going on with all that shit. That's fucking super trippy, like possibly one of the trippiest religions. And we can't see. Oh, great quote is it? Like, you can't. These some people can't see the forest for the trees. Well, they look at like, oh, it's just all organized. It's like no, like all of these religions have mystical. Well, yeah, mystical traditions that they emerge from, like Gnosticism, Christianity, Sufism, all of them have some trigger with this connection with beyond, the transcendent, and then the human ego, being its separate, three-dimensional, finite self, always turns it into something organized and rigid, because that's the game we're playing, and that's how you create human reality. It has to be like that in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing with the I think the challenge with the psychedelic space is that in the balance that we strike is it's so easy to step into that exact same uh, sort of role, right? Of
Mm.
being the disciples who construe the message for their own personal gain, or and or construe it, yeah, it's not always for their own personal gain, but you know what I'm saying. There's
Fully.
yeah, and that's I think the importance of people at the individual level being very much empowered, right? Like in sovereign and you know ability to access these things, and
Mm.
yeah, man, it's really important. I think that
That was a
that's
good way to tie it back. Very
and
much, yeah. To you like
one
you
thing.
like a. Oh, go on.
I'm sorry, man. I was just
That's
gonna
all
say
right.
last thing about the Jesus thing is you know, a lot of people talk about the second coming of Jesus as if it's like this sort of like figure thing,
Mm-hmm.
person, right? Actually, like Jesus is coming back, but like, um, I
Come
heard
back
somebody
to.
put, I heard somebody put it forth, and I love this, and I could see this. They said the second coming of Jesus isn't Jesus like a person. It's a sort of group collective consciousness that we're going to embody the Christ consciousness, and I was like,
I knew
yeah,
you were going to say that.
that's badass. Love
Tapped
that.
in, yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's really what the figurative message of it is. It's embodied. It's the second coming of Christ is humanity as a whole, not one person, the whole shebang. And yeah, think of the poetic narrative of life and the trajectory of human consciousness. That's what it really is like, what is consciousness doing? It's constantly working through its own shadow at all times, and the shadow is infinite, which means the love is infinite, because there's nothing more beautiful than overcoming the darkness and realizing, oh shit, the darkness in a sense is love, because it literally is like the catalyst for love. I mean, you don't always have to suffer to grow. The real grower is love itself, like the literal beauty. But I bet you've had times like, if I don't know, even physically, I fucking break my arm or something, like I break my toe, and then you go through this suffering, physical suffering, emotional labor, and then I always look back on them moments like, you know what, fucking, I'm actually really glad that happened, because it taught me a lot. This is a really great example for me personally. So I've talked very openly about my struggles with ketamine addiction, and last year I had the opportunity. I went away for a long time. Well, not a long time. I was away in Croatia, and for 2 weeks, and it was my longest stint off ket since I got addicted. And I had all the insights into why it was happening, and I had the insights solidified to then come back and get over it. And of course, day one, literally the minute I got back, I went and got some. And the minute got out the car, this has never happened to me ever in my whole life. I trapped my thumb in the car door, and my thumbnail, my left thumbnail, it ripped off. And I was like, what the actual living fuck? So obviously, the ego first was like, oh, you're an idiot. You were just rushing out the car. And then the real self tapped in. I was like, no, this was the universe sort of like just kicking me in the ass in a nice sense, saying like, mate, you could have evolved. And in that moment, we had to beat you down in a really nice way, because there's the love is also brutal, isn't it? Like, again, loving a partner and loving a child as well. You can't always be the sort of airy fairy sunshine and rainbows, because at the point you're going to have to navigate some shadow energy, some devilry, and I had to navigate my own devilry by suffering through it literally physically and being like, for fuck's sake, that was all my own doing, and that was the greatest injury I've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also, I'm sure when you think about it in big picture, you know, with the ketamine addiction thing, it's like, you know, I'm sure at the beginning there was probably these experiences that you had, right, that sort of reinforced your desire to go back. And I'm sure part of it was
Mm,
because like the actual experience itself was enjoyable. But like one thing I've experienced, especially with my first few ketamine experiences, was like really unique, sort of insightful headspace that seemed therapeutic, right? And then of course that can like get not therapeutic with how you use it and stuff like that. But like
mm.
the entire, I'm sure like now you can kind of look back on it as like the entire thing, the entire addiction, I think you said it was like 10 years or something like that. The entire thing was its own whole trip that was
Yeah.
giving me a certain sort of insight and thing, right?
Yeah, in a sense, I guess I was solidly addicted for like the past 3 years, but like I really had to like go back to the beginning. Like the minute I found Ket, I had like the addiction began then, and it was like a light addiction. I was like, you know what? I find it quite hard not to do it every other weekend or every time there's an event. Like I've got a bit of an attachment to it, and it just deepened and deepened, deepened, deepened. Gets worse. Also, the problem with Ket is the perma tolerance. The irony of it now is that within the past year of like battling through sort of, because I really am coming out. I'm very much coming out of it. I'm also cognizant of the fact that like relapses are part of the journey of recovery as well. So I also, you cannot berate yourself. You have to just you have to lock in. If it happens, do not fucking berate yourself, because then that's when you'll get back into the cycle. But yeah, the irony of it is in the past year, I don't think I've actually experienced the effects of ketamine, because it literally doesn't work on me anymore. Like my NMDA receptors, I cannot, they just can't do it. They're gone. They're fried. They
Yeah.
just can't. They can't produce the experience that I'm looking for. And that's when I was like, you know what? I've learned a bit like with psychedelics sometimes, or anything you need to let go. I was like, you've got to just fucking let it go, because this is the all these other things in my life. I can do all these other things, hobbies and whatever, and I can sort myself out, get healthy. I mean, I value my health in terms of diet and exercise. Anyway, all these areas of my life are sound, but the one thing that's dragging everything down was that. And it was like the mind that is attached to it. It's like, oh, I'll do all these other things in my life. Like I'll be the healthiest possible person in every respect, other than the fact that I literally am destroying my brain with this dissociative anesthetic all the time. And that's the rationalization of addiction. It's very scary. And a lot of us psychonauts have dealt with addiction. I feel like it's a part of almost like the spiritual journey. So many people I spoke to through this have had some sort of problem with that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a really interesting correlation with that, and I think that one of the things that I found is some of the most like lovable, interesting people that I've ever known are also have like some of the worst like addiction issues, and some of like you go through the nastiest things with that. I
Mm.
don't know what exactly the correlation is with that. I just think that there's something super powerful from people going to that extremely dark place, even if it is an extended period of time. Like that's awful. I hate that people have to be there, but there's something super powerful in being there and then like not being there anymore. You know what I mean? And like really having that perspective of like that's how bad it can be. Like it's I don't know if you have heard of these darkness retreats that people do where they
All
go
right.
into complete darkness for like a week or so. Usually at the beginning it's only for a few days, but what happens after like 3 or 4 days is you start to endogenously produce a neurochemical sort of soup of psychedelic compounds. They theorize DMT,
I
probably
was gonna
is
say, yeah.
DMT, NMT, probably a mix of things if I had to guess. But um, yeah, and people just report this. Of course, within that, there's this insightfulness, these visionary experiences. But after the darkness retreat, getting finally coming out of that darkness when people's like little eyelids things are lifted, almost like for like every single time, pretty reliably, people just begin to start sobbing, crying because
Mm.
they get this world back, right? And that's how bad it could be, right? It's just truly this perspective. I remember I had this feeling on meditation a few days ago where I do this thing. I meditate at least like twice a day. And every time when I'm coming back like into my body, I do this thing where I sort of like visualize the world around me, if you will, and like visual like and like come back into my body in that way and like really
Mm.
kind of like feel into my senses more and hear the things around me and like sort of reassociate myself with these things, before I open my eyes. Um, and I really like doing that. It's almost it kind of feels like being plugged back into the simulation. But I remember this one a few days ago. There was this really intense feeling and message that came through, of like when I did that, opened my eyes, this message came through that was really instant and clear, and it said, "It's a gift to be human. Like it's a gift to be human." It was
Mm.
very just simple like that. But yeah, and I think that. Uh, I think it likely is a part of a lot of our sort of spiritual paths, to have come
Yeah.
to that place.
The deepest people look at a lot. So many people I look up to in my own personal life, and beyond that, figures, artists, and everything. Just fucking go on like any of your favorite artist, deep person that you can think of. Go on the Wikipedia page. Look at like their life. Study their life. It's not sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of fucking obstacles that they had to overcome, but they did. They did it, and they kept doing it. Health challenges, circumstantial challenges, mental battles, like, um, and the way they sort of channel the love is by working through the abyss, working through the darkness. And every time something goes wrong with Vivec or whatever, and it does like get me down. Then the light sort of comes through. It's like this is the makings of the next chapter. And even in my own personal life, anything that usually breaks down is breaking down to then reconfigure into something much better. Um, the big thing with my ketamine addiction was I came out of a relationship, and it was like the person I finally found in my life. I was like, oh shit, this is like love. This is the intimate love that I've been searching my whole life. I was always a bit of like an incel growing up, and then I broke out of it, and I was like, oh my god, finally fucking broke out of it. I've got everything I wanted out of the partner, beautiful person. How can it possibly go wrong? And then it did, and there was a lot of like, and I basically just we both had turned into the devil, didn't integrate the shadow, all this bollocks that we should have done, but it just wasn't meant to be. But then I found that's when I got addicted to get properly, because I was like, I'm now going to that thing that completely, like all drugs in a sense help you escape reality, but then some of them turn into something dark. Ket was the most reproducible one for me, where it's like for me having such like serious like neuroses and like an overactive mind. What I've always loved about, I've never tried any other dissociatives other than Ket and MXC, but what I love about dissociatives, or like my ego does, is that it just the thought just go the thought the thing I've been trying to battle my whole life and escape just goes. So it stopped me from doing that inner work of like processing the relationship, and I feel like finally now I've actually really worked through it. Funny enough, I keep having like dreams of my ex-partner, not in like a lustful or what should I have done sort of way, but in a sort of like, oh, we've moved on and everything's great. And actually, another even just a practical thing about this is the act of forgiveness. Is if I've wronged someone and I know that I've wronged them or I've hurt them, it comes a point when I fully process it and move on, and I always try and get back in touch with them and be like, you know what, we're fucking good. We don't have to link up or whatever. I don't want us to link up, but I just want you to know that what happened happened, and we worked through it and we did the best we could. And always the other person says, I'm glad you messaged me that, because I was thinking the exact same thing. And that is the process of forgiveness and integration and unification that you need to come away from these dark points and put back into your life in a practical, pragmatic way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, brother.
My
Absolutely.
G.
So, is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with for today? I feel like me and you could probably just talk for the next 8 hours, but we'll chop it up into different podcasts.
Yeah. It's been an absolutely excellent conversation. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Um, just all I want to say to people is, if you enjoy our stuff, make sure to check us all out, because I know there's always like little sections of the fan base and some like, oh, I prefer this guy's approach, blah blah. But it's like, I encourage you as a psychonaut and as an open-minded person, check out all of us, because we're all implementing our own uniqueness and breadth and depth of knowledge, experience in this field, and you can learn something from all of us. Don't just get stuck on one podcast, one person, and even just do that in real life. Not in real life, but in other areas of your life. Uh, Try and piece the whole puzzle together, not just one little part of it, and get stuck on putting, oh, I'll just put more pieces around this part. Try and fucking do the whole thing. We've got a great community. I love all of you guys. Honestly, it's also been a pleasure of mine to sort of take a bit of an active role in really trying to gather everyone together, because I am not I'm not even not I go on my fucking like Myers Briggs personality test. I'm not a leader type person, but I'm a campaigner. I like campaigning for the group. I don't like to be the leader, but I like to just be the one to put the piece together, get all the cool minds, put them in a little box, throw them around, and yeah, I feel like we've got a good thing going on, and I really
Yeah.
respect your work.
Thanks, brother. I respect yours too. Yeah, for people who don't know what Vivek is talking about, we have this whole like group chat and group thing that we do with other psychedelic content creators, and it's absolutely fantastic. I'll link to a bunch of their stuff down below. I'll also link to Vivek's stuff. But yeah, man, I appreciate you. I love you dearly, and I can't wait to have you back on, brother.
And also, I'm looking forward to meeting you in real life one day, which has to happen in real life, lol.
Yeah, dude. Either
In
we'll get you
person.
over here to the States, or I'll be in the UK. Like, yeah, dude, we have to do that. That
Oh,
would be awesome.
it's inevitable. There's just no way. There's no way.
We've already planted that seed, and we're just going to continue to water it with love.
Fucking right. That's what we're all about.
Tyler, and Jake were talking about possibly doing something in like 2025. So yeah, dude, we'll just loop you in too. But yeah,
Absolutely.
we'll see. We'll see what comes to fruition.
Yep.
But,
Got a long
man.
time.
Peace out. Much love, brother.
My G.
That's sick.
Big love.